Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the U.S. Defiance, watching the screens with growing dread. The stars outside had been peaceful just hours ago. Now, dark shapes blocked out the light. Ships, thousands of them, maybe millions. "Sir, we're getting readings from all across the system," reported Lieutenant Sam Carter from his station. "They just appeared out of nowhere. No warning, no transition signatures. They're just ... There." Jake had been in space for 30 years. He had seen pirates, rebels, and corporate wars, but nothing like this. The alien fleet stretched beyond the edge of his sensors. Each ship was larger than anything humans had ever built. The smallest ones were the size of cities. The largest ones looked like floating mountains. "Get me a line to Earth Command," Jake ordered. His voice stayed calm, but his hands shook slightly as he gripped the rail. Captain Ben Taylor was having the same problem on Mars Defense Station. He watched the alien ships through his telescope, counting until he gave up. There were too many. They moved in perfect formation, like a school of fish made of metal and energy. "They're not attacking," his second-in-command, Commander Lisa Park, said quietly. "They're just ... waiting." Ben nodded. "That's what worries me. If they wanted to destroy us, they would have done it already. They want something else." On Earth, President Kate Sullivan was in the emergency bunker deep under the White House. The room was full of generals, scientists, and world leaders. Everyone was talking at once, but no one had answers. The alien fleet had appeared 12 hours ago, and they still hadn't sent any message. "Madam President," General Chris Morgan said, his face grim, "our best estimates put their fleet at over 10 million ships. Each one is armed with weapons we don't understand. If they attack, we have maybe 6 hours before every human city is gone." Dr. Amy Foster, the head of Earth's Science Division, pulled up holographic displays. "The energy readings are incredible. A single one of their smaller ships puts out more power than our entire Pacific fleet. And their shields." She shook her head. "We fired test shots from the lunar batteries. The energy just disappeared, like it was never there." Kate looked around the room. "What do they want?" Her answer came 20 minutes later. A new signal appeared on all human communication channels. It was strong, clear, and impossible to ignore. Every screen on Earth, Mars, and the outer colonies showed the same image. The alien was tall and thin, with blue-gray skin and 4 arms. Its eyes were large and completely black. When it spoke, the words came in perfect English, though its mouth didn't move in the right way. "I am High Commander Zeth Kara of the Kethran Empire. You will listen." The image was broadcasting to every human device at once. Phones, computers, even old radios picked up the signal. There was no way to turn it off. "Your species has been catalogued and evaluated. You have reached a sufficient development to be useful to the Empire. You will surrender unconditionally within 72 hours. Jake felt his blood turn cold. On Mars, Ben's crew stopped their work to stare at the screens. In the bunker, every conversation died. "These are your terms," the alien continued. "All military assets will be dismantled. All weapons will be destroyed. Your population will be reduced to sustainable levels and relocated to designated worlds. Your home planets will be stripped of useful materials. Those who survive will serve the Empire as directed." The alien's black eyes seemed to look directly through the screen. "The Kethran Empire has ruled for 4,000 years. We have conquered 10,000 species across 3 galaxies. Not one has ever refused our terms. Not one has ever regretted their choice to surrender." Kate stood up slowly. Around her, the generals and scientists looked sick. Some were already reaching for their phones to call their families. "You have 72 hours to respond. If you choose to resist, you will be eliminated. If you choose to surrender, you will be absorbed. There is no third option. This message will not be repeated. The screens went dark. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then General Morgan cleared his throat. Madam President, we need to discuss our options. What options? Dr. Foster asked bitterly. Did you see those ships? Did you hear what he said? 10,000 species, 3 galaxies. We're not special. We're just next. We could fight, suggested Admiral Rodriguez from the Pacific Fleet. Go down swinging. And accomplish what? Morgan shot back. They'd wipe us out in hours. At least if we surrender, some humans survive. Cape listened to the arguments go back and forth. Fight and die, or surrender and watch humanity disappear into an alien empire. Neither choice seemed acceptable. On the U.E.'s Defiance, Jake was having similar thoughts. His crew looked to him for orders, but what could he tell them? That they were about to become slaves? That their families would be scattered across alien worlds? Sir, Lieutenant Carter said quietly, Mars Defense is asking for instructions. All the outer colonies are requesting orders. They want to know what we're going to do. Jake looked at the tactical display. The alien ships hadn't moved. They were waiting patiently for humanity's answer, like adults waiting for children to make the obvious choice. But something in Jake's chest rebelled against that patience. They expected humans to roll over, to accept whatever fate they offered. They had conquered 10,000 species, and apparently none of them had ever said, "No, get me a secure channel to Earth Command," he ordered, "and patch in all fleet commanders and colony leaders. Everyone needs to hear this." The next hour was the most important in human history. Leaders from every world, every ship, every station joined the emergency conference. The debate was fierce but short. Some argued for surrender, others for hopeless resistance. A few suggested trying to negotiate, but as the votes came in, a pattern emerged. Earth voted no. Mars voted no. The outer colonies voted no. Even the small mining stations in the asteroid belt voted no. President Sullivan looked around. The bunker won last time. The vote is unanimous. We reject the Catherine terms. She turned to the communications officer. Send this message to their flagship. Humanity's answer is no. The message went out across space, a simple transmission that would change the galaxy forever. On the alien mothership, High Commander Zeth Kara received it with something that might have been surprised no species had ever refused. In 4,000 years of conquest, the word no had never been spoken in response to their terms. But humans, it seemed, were different. The countdown began. 72 hours to live free or die. Trying. The Catherine response came exactly 12 hours after humanity's refusal. High Commander Zeth Kara had waited, perhaps expecting the humans to change their minds. When they didn't, he acted with swift, brutal efficiency. The first target was Titan Base, the large mining station orbiting Saturn. Commander Dan Rodriguez watched the alien ships approach on his screens. They moved slowly, confidently, like predators stalking wounded prey. "Sir, we're getting a transmission from the lead ship," reported his communications officer, Jenny Walsh. Dan knew what they wanted: surrender, submit, join the Empire, or die. He had heard the same message every human leader was getting across. The solar system. "Patch me through to all stations," Dan ordered. Colony-wide broadcast. His face appeared on every screen in Titan Base. Workers in the deep mines, families in the residential areas, children in the schools. Everyone could see him. "This is Commander Rodriguez," he said calmly. "You all know what's happening. The aliens want our home. They want our resources. They want us to become their slaves." He paused, looking directly into the camera. "I have a different idea. In the depths of Titan Base, nuclear reactors hummed with power. The mining operation used massive amounts of energy to crack through the moon's frozen surface. Those same reactors could be turned into weapons. Protocol Omega is now active, Dan announced. All non-essential personnel report to the evacuation ships. Essential personnel? You know what to do. Jenny looked at him with wide eyes. Sir, Protocol Omega will destroy the entire base. The whole moon will be uninhabitable for thousands of years. That's the point, Dan replied. If we can't have it, neither can they. The evacuation took 6 hours. Most of the colonists made it to the transport ships, which immediately jumped. To hyperspace. They carried the families, the children, the elderly, the ones who couldn't fight but deserved to live. Dan and his volunteer crew stayed behind. They worked quickly, overriding safety systems and pushing the reactors past their limits. The alien ships were getting closer, their weapons charging for what they expected to be an easy victory. Sir, the first wave is entering orbit, reported Lieutenant Mike Barnes from the Defense Center. They're scanning the surface. I think they're looking for the best place to land. Dan smiled grimly. Let them look. The nuclear reactors reached critical mass at the same moment the alien landing craft touched Titan's surface. The explosion was visible from Saturn itself. Titan Base, built over decades with the blood and sweat of human workers, vanished in a ball of atomic fire. The alien scanning equipment registered the explosion seconds before the radiation hit their ships. Several of the smaller craft were destroyed instantly. The larger ones pulled back, their shields flaring as they tried to protect themselves from the nuclear storm. When the fire cleared, Titan was gone. Not just the base, but the entire moon. In its place was a slowly expanding cloud of radioactive debris. On Europa, Director Susan Clark watched the news feeds with grim satisfaction. The alien fleet approaching Jupiter had seen what happened to Titan. They were being more careful now, staying at a safe distance while they decided what to do. Ma'am, her assistant, Captain Joe Turner, said quietly, we're getting the same. Surrender demands. They want us to disable our defenses and prepare for occupation. Susan looked out the window at Europa's surface. The research station was humanity's greatest achievement, a city under the ice where scientists worked to unlock the secrets of life itself. The oceans beneath the frozen surface teemed with alien microbes that could revolutionize medicine. How long until the evacuation is complete? She asked. Another 8 hours. The science teams are downloading the most important research data. The families are already on the transport ships. Susan nodded. She had made her choice the moment she heard about Titan. If humanity was going to die, they would die on their own terms. The alien ships moved closer as the hours passed. They sent smaller scouts to test Europa's defenses, probing for weaknesses. They found none because there weren't any. Europa wasn't built to fight. It was built to discover. But discovery could be a weapon too. Initialize the fusion reactors. Susan ordered, override all safety protocols. I want them running at maximum output. Captain Turner's face went pale. Ma'am, that will boil away the oceans. The pressure will crack the ice shell. The entire moon will become uninhabitable. I know, Susan said simply. Send the final data burst to Earth. Everything we've learned, everything we've discovered. At least our work will survive. The fusion reactors that powered Europa's research stations were marvels of human engineering. They could provide clean energy for 1,000 years. They could also be turned into the largest bombs humanity had ever created. The alien fleet was moving into position when Europa's surface began to glow. The ice cracked and melted as the reactors overloaded. The hidden oceans boiled into steam. The research stations, the laboratories, the great underwater cities, all of it disappeared in superheated gas. The explosion was even larger than Titan's. Europa became a miniature sun for several minutes, burning so bright it could be seen from Earth with the naked eye. When it faded, there was nothing left but expanding plasma and the twisted remains of what had once been a moon. The pattern repeated across the solar system. On Ceres, Captain Rick Santos turned the asteroid's antimatter storage into a weapon that scattered debris across half the asteroid belt. On Ganymede, Colonel Lavra Mitchell collapsed the underground cities with thermonuclear charges, ensuring the aliens would find nothing but molten rock. Every human outpost became a funeral pyre. Every research station became a bomb. Every mining operation became a weapon turned against itself. The alien fleet, which had expected easy conquest, found themselves facing something they had never encountered in 4,000 years of expansion. An enemy that would rather die than surrender. An enemy that destroyed everything rather than let it be taken. High Commander Zeeth Kara stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the tactical displays with growing confusion. His fleet had lost over 100 ships to the human suicide attacks. Worse, they had gained nothing. Every world they approached was either empty or destroyed. "Commander," his tactical officer reported, "the humans are broadcasting again." Transmission came from Earth, from President Sullivan herself. She looked tired but determined as she spoke to the alien fleet. "You came here expecting to find slaves," she said. "You were wrong. You came here expecting to harvest resources. You were wrong about that, too. We are not your subjects. We are not your cattle. We are human beings, and we choose death over slavery." She paused, looking directly into the camera. "If you want our worlds, you can have them, as radioactive ash." The transmission ended. Zeeth Kara stared at the screen, his forearms trembling with rage. No species had ever chosen this path. Species had ever preferred destruction to absorption into the Empire. But as his fleet moved toward the inner planets, they found that Mars was already beginning to burn. The humans had meant every word. The war for humanity's soul had begun, and humanity was winning by losing everything. Mars had been humanity's second home for over a century. Red dust storms that once killed the first explorers now blew past domed cities and green gardens. The terraforming project had taken generations, turning a dead world into something that could support millions of human lives. General Chris Morgan stood in the command center of New Phoenix, Mars's capital city. Through the reinforced windows, he could see the alien fleet approaching. Their ships blotted out the sun, casting long shadows across the red landscape. "Sir, all civilian evacuations are complete," reported Colonel Dave Harrison. "The last transport left 3 hours ago. Only military personnel remain." Morgan nodded. The evacuation had been a miracle of organization. Cargo ships, passenger liners, even old mining vessels had been pressed into service. Families were crammed into spaces designed for equipment. Children slept in cargo holds while their parents tried to explain why they were leaving the only home they had ever known. "What about the terraforming equipment?" Morgan asked. "Rigged with explosives, sir. The atmospheric processors, the water recyclers, the climate generators. Everything that took us 100 years to build can be destroyed in minutes." Morgan walked to the tactical display. Mars had been humanity's greatest achievement, proof that they could turn a dead world into a living one. Now it would become proof of something else entirely. "Incoming transmission from the alien fleet," announced Lieutenant Paula Roberts from the communications station. The alien face appeared on the main screen. It was the same being who had delivered the ultimatum. High Commander Zeeth Kara. His black eyes seemed to bore into Morgan's soul. "Human Commander," the alien said, his voice carrying through the translation system. "You have witnessed the fate of your outer colonies. Surrender now, and this world will be spared. Continue to resist, and you will share their fate. Morgan looked at the alien for a long moment. Mars is not just a world, alien. It's a dream. The dream that humans can go anywhere, survive anywhere, build anywhere. If you take it from us, it's just another rock in your empire. You would destroy your own achievement rather than let us have it? Watch us. The transmission ended. Morgan turned to his staff. Begin the final phase. All units, execute protocol. Omega. Across Mars, the destruction began. The great atmospheric processors that had taken decades to build erupted in nuclear fire. The polar ice caps melted and reformed over generations, vaporized in minutes. The deep aquifers that had been humanity's greatest discovery on Mars were poisoned with radioactive waste. The underground cities were the hardest to destroy. New? Phoenix, Port Olympus, and the dozen smaller settlements had been carved from living rock. They were built to last forever, to house millions of people in safety and comfort. But human engineers had built them, and human engineers knew how to unmake them. The demolition charges were placed with surgical precision. The fusion reactors were overloaded in sequence. The great supporting pillars were cut away with plasma torches. One by one, the cities of Mars collapsed into themselves, their lights going out forever. Dr. Amy Foster watched from the evacuation ship as her life's work disappeared. She had spent 20 years on Mars, helping to design the climate systems that kept the cities alive. Now she was watching them die. "Ma'am," said her assistant, Dr. Carl Thompson, "the final data transmission is ready. All our research, all our discoveries about Mars terraforming. Should we send it to Earth?" Amy nodded. "Send it. Maybe someday, when this is over, humans will terraform another world. They'll need to know what we learned." The data burst shot across space, carrying the accumulated knowledge of a century. How to melt polar ice, how to thicken an atmosphere, how to create weather patterns from nothing. It was humanity's gift to the future, sent just as they destroyed the present. The alien fleet entered Mars' orbit as the planet died. Zethkara watched the destruction with something approaching disbelief. The humans were destroying in hours. What had taken them a century to create? "Commander," his science officer reported, "the atmosphere is becoming unstable. The temperature is rising rapidly. The entire ecosystem is collapsing. Can we stop it?" "Not without interfering with the planet's core. The humans have triggered a cascade failure. Mars is reverting to its original state." Zethkara's forearms clenched into fists. "Send troops to the surface. Capture whatever facilities remain." Intact, but there was nothing left to capture. The landing parties found only ruins and radiation. The great cities were tombs. The terraforming equipment was melted slag. Even the orbital stations around Mars had been destroyed by their own crews. On Luna, similar preparations were underway. The moon had been humanity's first permanent off-world colony. The great cities carved into the lunar surface housed millions of people. The industrial complexes built into the far side processed raw materials for the entire solar system. "Commander." Betty Adams supervised the evacuation from Luna City's main spaceport. The last civilian ships were launching, carrying families and children to safety. The great electromagnetic launchers that had once sent cargo to Earth were now sending refugees. "Ma'am," reported her second-in-command, Major Steve Wilson, "all non-essential personnel have been evacuated. The demolition teams are in position." Betty looked up at the Earth through the transparent dome above them. The blue and white marble hung in the black sky, beautiful and fragile. Soon, it too would be in danger. "The quantum bombs are ready?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am. Dr. Foster's team finished the installation before they evacuated. The experimental devices are placed throughout the lunar core. When they detonate, they'll destabilize the moon's internal structure." Betty nodded. The quantum bombs were untested technology designed to crack open asteroids for mining. They had never been used on anything as large as Luna, the computer. Models suggested they would work, but computer models were sometimes wrong. "Begin the countdown," she ordered. The alien fleet was approaching Luna when the moon began to crack. The quantum bombs detonated in sequence, sending shockwaves through the lunar core. The surface split open like a broken egg, revealing molten rock beneath Luna City died in minutes. The great domes that had protected millions of humans for generations shattered like glass. The manufacturing plants, the research facilities, the historical sites where humanity had first learned to live in space, all of it disappeared into the spreading cracks. The moon continued to break apart for hours. What had once been humanity's first stepping stone to the stars became a slowly expanding debris field. The alien ships were forced to retreat as chunks of lunar material crashed into their hulls. On Earth, President Sullivan watched the destruction through telescopes and satellites. Mars was a glowing ember. Luna was a cloud of rubble. The outer colonies were already gone, erased by their own defenders. "Madam President," General Morgan's voice came through the communication system. "We're ready to begin the final phase." All major population centers have been evacuated to the deep bunkers. The military assets are in position. Kate looked around the bunker. The world's leaders sat in stunned silence, watching their civilization destroy itself rather than submit to alien rule. Some were crying. Others sat in shocked silence. A few were praying. "The alien fleet is demanding immediate surrender," Morgan continued. "They're threatening to destroy every major city if we don't comply within the hour." Kate closed her eyes. This was the moment she had been dreading, the moment when humanity's last choice would be made. "General," she said quietly, "begin the Prometheus Protocol. If we're going to die, we'll die as free humans." The orders went out across Earth. In missile silos, launch codes were entered. In military bases, weapons were armed. In research facilities, experimental devices were activated. The alien fleet hung in Earth's sky like a promise of doom. But below them, humanity prepared to make the ultimate sacrifice. Freedom was worth any price, even the price of everything. The Catherine fleet surrounded Earth like a metal storm. Thousands of ships, each one larger than anything humans had ever built, hung in the darkness above the blue world. High Commander Zeth Kara stood on the bridge of his flagship, staring down at the planet that had defied his empire. "Commander," his tactical officer reported, "our scans show massive energy buildups across the planet's surface. The humans are preparing something." Zeth Kara's four arms moved restlessly. In 4,000 years of conquest, he had never faced anything like this. Other species had fought back, yes. Some had been brave, some had been clever, but none had chosen complete self-destruction over surrender. "Open a channel to the human leadership," he ordered. President Kate Sullivan received the transmission in the deep bunker beneath the Rocky Mountains. Around her, military officers and scientists worked frantically at their stations, preparing for humanity's final act. The alien's face appeared on the main screen. His black eyes seemed to look directly at her, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of an empire that had ruled the galaxy for millennia. "Human leader," Zeth Kara said, "you have seen the fate of your colonies. Mars burns, your moon is debris. Your outer settlements are radioactive ash. Yet you continue this madness." Kate stood up slowly. She was tired, so tired. The last week had aged her decades. But her voice was steady when she replied, "What do you want from us?" "I want you to live," the alien said, and there was something that might have been frustration in his voice. "You are destroying everything of value. Your technology, your art, your knowledge. Why?" "Because they're ours," Kate replied simply. If we can't have them free, we won't have them at all. This is insane. No species has ever chosen extinction over absorption into the Empire. You could live. Your children could live. As part of something greater than yourselves. Kate looked around the bunker at the faces of Earth's leaders. General Morgan, his uniform crisp despite the chaos. Dr. Foster, her eyes red from crying over the destruction of Mars. Admiral Rodriguez, who had volunteered to stay behind and coordinate. The final defense. As slaves, Kate said. As citizens of the Empire. The same thing. The transmission ended. Zethkara stared at the blank screen, his mind racing. He had conquered 10,000 species. He had seen every form of resistance, every desperate gambit, every last stand. But this was different. This was not resistance. This was suicide on a species-wide scale. Send the final ultimatum, he ordered. Full surrender in 1 hour, or we destroy every population center on the planet. The message went out across Earth. In the deep bunkers, families hugged their children. In the military bases, soldiers prepared for the end. In the research facilities, scientists uploaded their final data to the quantum storage banks that would survive even nuclear fire. Commander Tony Walker led the last squadron of human fighters in orbit around Earth. His 12 ships were all that remained of humanity's space force. They were outnumbered 1,000,000 to 1, but they had a job to do. All right, people, he said into his radio. Our job is simple. We make sure the aliens have a front row seat to humanity's last stand. When Earth lights up, I want every one of those alien ships to see it. His pilots were volunteers, men and women who had chosen to die in space rather than live as slaves. They knew they couldn't win. They knew their weapons couldn't even scratch the alien ships. But they could make a statement. Tony 6 to all fighters. In the voice of Captain Lisa Brooks, his wingman. I've got movement in the alien fleet. Looks like they're positioning for planetary bombardment. Tony checked his instruments. The alien ships were moving into attack formation, their massive weapons turning toward Earth. They were getting ready to make good on their threat. All fighters, attack pattern Delta, Tony ordered. Take out as many scout ships as you can. Make them remember us. The 12 human fighters dove toward the alien fleet like sparrows attacking eagles. Their missiles and energy weapons couldn't penetrate the larger ship's shields, but they could damage the smaller scout vessels. Tony's fighter screamed through space, its engines pushed beyond their limits. He fired everything he had at an alien cruiser, watching his weapons disappear harmlessly against its shields. Then he did something the aliens didn't expect. He rammed his ship into the alien vessel at full speed. The fighter disappeared in a ball of fire, but the alien ship staggered, its shields flickering. One by one, the other human pilots followed his example. They turned their ships into weapons, their lives into statements. The alien fleet barely noticed the loss of a few scout ships, but they noticed the message. On Earth, the final preparations were complete. Dr. Foster stood in the deepest part of the bunker, her hand on the control panel that would activate the Prometheus protocol. Around her, massive machines hummed with power. Amy, General Morgan said softly, are you sure about this? She looked at him with sad eyes. We've run the calculations 1,000 times. The planet-cracking weapons will split the crust. The antimatter. Bombs will destabilize the core. The fusion reactors will overload simultaneously. Earth will become a star for about 6 hours. And the bunkers? We'll hold, maybe. We'll be the only humans left, buried under miles of rock and metal, waiting for the radiation to fade. Morgan nodded. How long? Maybe 1,000 years. Maybe 10,000. Depends on how much of the planet survives. Above them, the alien fleet was moving into position. Energy readings spiked as their weapons prepared to fire. Zethkara had made His choice. If the humans wouldn't surrender, he would wipe them out and take what remained of their world. Incoming transmission from the alien fleet, announced the communications officer. Kate took the call. Seth Kara's face appeared one last. Time on the screen. This is your final chance, he said. Surrender now, and 10% of your population will be spared. Continue this madness, and every human life will be extinguished. Kate looked at the alien commander for a long moment. You still don't understand, do you? We're not doing this because we want to die. We're doing this because we want to live. Free, even if it's only for a few more minutes. You are destroying your own children's future. No, Kate said firmly. We're making sure our children's future will be their own to choose. The transmission ended. Kate turned to Dr. Foster. Amy, begin the Prometheus protocol. Above them, the alien fleet opened fire. Energy beams that could melt mountains struck. Earth's atmosphere. Cities that had stood for centuries disappeared in seconds. But the aliens were too late. The planet-cracking weapons fired first. Deep beneath the Earth's crust, experimental devices designed to split asteroids for mining turned their power on the planet itself. The ground cracked, the oceans boiled. The atmosphere began to burn. The antimatter bombs detonated in sequence, their incredible energy tearing at the planet's core. The fusion reactors that had powered human civilization for generations overloaded simultaneously, adding their fire to the growing inferno. Earth became a star. The blast was visible from Mars, a brilliant flash that outshone the sun. The alien fleet, caught in the expanding wave of energy, lost hundreds of ships. The rest pulled back, their sensors overwhelmed by the incredible light. When the fire faded, Earth was gone. In its place was an expanding cloud of superheated gas and molten rock. The birth world of humanity, the cradle of human civilization, had chosen to die rather than live in chains. Deep in the bunkers, the survivors felt the planet shake around them. The massive shields held barely. Emergency power flickered on as the main systems failed. In the darkness, a few thousand humans waited to see if they would be the last of their kind. President Kate Sullivan sat in the command chair, listening to the damage reports. The bunkers were holding. The life support systems were functioning. The genetic samples and cultural databases were intact. Ma'am, whispered General Morgan, we did it. We're alive. Kate nodded, but there was no joy in her voice. We're alive, but Earth is dead. Mars is dead. Luna is dead. Everything we built, everything we were, it's all gone. We're still human, Dr. Foster said quietly. That's what matters. Above them, the alien fleet regrouped. Sith Kara stood on his bridge, staring at the expanding debris field that had once been Earth. His empire had gained nothing. His fleet had lost thousands of ships. His enemies had chosen death over defeat. For the first time in 4,000 years, the Kethran Empire had been denied victory, not by superior force, not by clever strategy, but by the simple refusal to surrender. The humans were gone. But somehow, Seth Kara knew they had won. 5 years had passed since Earth died. The expanding cloud of gas and debris still glowed faintly in the darkness, a monument to a species that had chosen freedom over life itself. The Kethran Empire had moved on, claiming other worlds, conquering other species. But the story of humanity's last stand had spread throughout the galaxy like wildfire. Captain Julie Barnes stood on the bridge of the cargo ship New Hope, watching the stars through the forward viewports. Her ship was one of the few human vessels that had escaped the solar system during the evacuation. For 5 years, she had been searching for a new home, carrying the genetic samples and cultural records that might allow humanity to survive. Captain, reported her navigator, Lieutenant Alex Chun, we're approaching the Kepler system. Sensors show 3 potentially habitable worlds. Julie nodded. The Kepler system was far from the trade routes, far from the Empire's attention. It might be the perfect place to start again. But starting again meant more than just finding a planet. It meant keeping the memory of Earth alive. Any signs of intelligent life? She asked. Negative. But I'm picking up some interesting energy readings from the second planet. Could be ruins of some kind. Julie had learned to be careful about ruins. The galaxy was full of dead civilizations. Species that had been conquered by the Empire and forgotten. But sometimes ruins held secrets. Take us into orbit. Let's see what we find. Meanwhile, in the deep bunkers beneath what had once been Earth, the survivors were facing their own challenges. President Kate Sullivan, now graying and worn, led the few thousand humans who had survived the planet's death. They lived in darkness, sustained by recycled air and artificial food, waiting for the radiation to fade. "Ma'am," reported Dr. Foster, now the head of the Survival Council, "the latest surveys show the radiation levels are dropping faster than expected. We might be able to reach the surface in 50 years instead of 100. Kate nodded. "What about the other projects?" "The genetic reconstruction program is proceeding on schedule. We have enough samples to restore most of Earth's ecosystem. The Cultural Preservation Archive is complete. And the children are learning. The children. There are only a few hundred of them, born in the bunkers after Earth's destruction. They had never seen sunlight, never breathed natural air, never walked on grass. But they carried the hope of the human race in their hearts. They asked questions," Dr. Foster continued, "about the surface world, about the stars, about why we chose to destroy everything rather than surrender." "What do you tell them?" Kate asked. Truth, that freedom is not something you can give or take away. It's something you choose every day, no matter the cost." Across the galaxy, that same truth was spreading in ways the survivors could never have imagined. The story of humanity's sacrifice had reached the slave worlds of the Empire, carried by traders and travelers who had witnessed the destruction of the solar system. On the mining world of Vega Prime, the reptilian Zephyrins whispered the story in their underground tunnels. They had been slaves for 3 centuries, their homeworld stripped bare to feed the Empire's hunger. But now they heard of a species that had said no, and meant it. "Is it true?" asked Sektar, an old miner whose scales were scarred from years of hard labor. "Did the humans really destroy their own worlds rather than submit?" His companion, Valkyra, nodded slowly. "I heard it from a trader who was there. He saw Earth burn. Said it was brighter than their sun for 6 hours. Around them, other Zephyrins stopped their work to listen. The idea was incredible, almost unthinkable. No species had ever defied the Empire and survived. No species had ever chosen death over submission. What happened to them?" asked a young worker named Thekval. "Gone," Valkyra replied. "All of them. But they took something from the Empire when they died. They took the myth that conquest is always possible. The word spread. In the crystal cities of Andromeda, the ethereal Quillians discussed the human sacrifice in their musical language. In the water worlds of the Outer Rim, the aquatic Morphons sang new songs about a species that burned like stars rather than bow. To Tyrannidot, and in the deepest vaults of the Empire, High Commander Zeth Kara studied the reports with growing unease. Rebellions were starting, small ones at first, easily crushed. But they were spreading. Commander, his intelligence officer, reported, "We have uprisings on 17 worlds this month. The conquered species are becoming restless." "What are they saying?" They quote the humans. "Death before slavery. Freedom is worth any price. The human sacrifice has become a symbol of resistance." Zethkara's 4 arms clenched into fists. "They are all dead. What does it matter what they said? Because ideas don't die, sir. The humans may be gone, but their choice lives on. Captain Julie Barnes had found something remarkable on the second planet of the Kepler system. The ruins were not from a dead civilization, but from a living one that had gone into hiding. The Altarians were peaceful beings, refugees from their own world, who had fled when the Empire came calling. We have watched the stars for signs of hope, their leader, Elder Kithorn, told Julie through translation devices. When we heard of the human sacrifice, we knew that resistance was possible. Julie looked at the Altarian settlement, hidden, beneath the planet's surface. You've been hiding here for how long? 200 years. We thought we were the only ones who had escaped the Empire. But your people proved that there are other ways to resist. We didn't resist, Julie said bitterly. We just died. No, Kithorn replied. You chose. That is the most powerful form of resistance there is. The Altarians had preserved their culture, their technology, their way of life. They had been waiting for a sign that they were not alone in their opposition to the Empire. The human sacrifice had given them that sign. We have ships, Kithorn continued. Hidden fleets, secret bases, weapons the Empire has never seen. We have been preparing for the day when resistance becomes possible. And now? Now we have a symbol. The humans who burned their worlds for freedom. Will you help us spread that symbol? Julie looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, in the deep bunkers of dead Earth, her fellow humans were waiting for a new dawn. Somewhere else, the genetic samples and cultural records might be growing into new human colonies. And here, in this hidden refuge, aliens who had never met a human were willing to fight for the same ideals. Yes, she said. We'll help. The resistance grew slowly at first, then faster as more species heard the story. The Zephyrins rose up. On Vega Prime, fighting with mining tools and desperation. The Quillians sabotaged Imperial supply lines with their advanced technology. The Morphins used their knowledge of deep space to create hidden bases in asteroid fields. Each rebellion was crushed, but each one lasted longer than the last. Each defeated species passed the story to others. Each failure inspired new attempts. In the Empire's capital, on the ancient world of Kethara, the High Council met in emergency session. The reports from across the galaxy painted a disturbing picture. Conquered species that had been peaceful for centuries were suddenly becoming violent. Worlds that had accepted imperial rule were declaring independence. It's the human example, Zethkara explained to the assembled counselors. They have become martyrs to every enslaved species in the galaxy. But they are dead, protested Counselor Vexthara. How can dead beings threaten the Empire? Because they proved something we have spent 4,000 years denying. That slavery is a choice. That surrender is not inevitable. That some things are worth dying for. The oldest counselor, Ancient Mordegaier, spoke from his position at the head of the table. What do you propose? We must erase them from history. Destroy every record, every story, every memory of what they did. Make it as if they never existed, but it was too late. The story had spread too far, taken root too deeply. On 1,000 worlds, in 1,000,000 hearts, the memory of humanity's choice burned like an eternal flame. Back on dead Earth in the deep bunkers, the children were growing up. They learned mathematics and science, art and literature, all the accumulated knowledge of human civilization. But most importantly, they learned why their parents had made the ultimate sacrifice. Tell us again about the surface, asked young Peter Williams. Barely 8 years old, Kate Sullivan, now ancient and frail, smiled at the boy. There were trees, Peter, green things that reached toward the sky, and grass soft under your feet, and a sun that warmed your face. Will we see them again? Someday, when it's safe, we'll go back to the surface. We'll plant new trees, grow new grass, build new cities. And we'll remember why we're free to do it. Because we chose to be free? That's right, because we chose to be free. The legend of humanity spread across the galaxy like a virus the Empire couldn't cure. It infected the dreams of slaves, the hopes of the conquered, the fears of the conquerors. It whispered in alien languages on distant worlds, "You have a choice." Sometimes, just sometimes, species made the same choice humanity had made. They chose freedom over safety, dignity over survival, death over slavery. The Empire still ruled most of the galaxy. Their fleets still conquered worlds. Their armies still crushed rebellions. But something had changed. The myth of inevitable conquest was broken. The idea that resistance was futile had died with Earth. Captain Julie Barnes. Now Admiral Barnes of the Free Species Alliance stood on TH.